for you as an obligation?
No, I had a nice time.
Nice time, yeah.
We have a couple of breaks, and
It begins with a question almost no one dares to ask. What does it feel like when Robert De Niro, one of the most disciplined, respected, and feared actors in Hollywood, cannot stand working with you? Behind the calm eyes and quiet professionalism, De Niro has carried decades of unspoken tension, moments when collaboration turned into confrontation, respect collapsed into disappointment, and legendary sets became battlegrounds of ego, method, and artistic clash. Some actors irritated him, some confused him, and a few pushed so far that De Niro walked away feeling betrayed, drained, or even physically sick. For the first time, we peel back the curtain on the 7 actors Robert De Niro hated working with the most, and the emotional storms that erupted behind the scenes. These are not tabloid rumors. These are real conflicts, real tensions, real stories from the sets of Silver Linings Playbook, Joker, Casino. Analyze This, Meet the Parents, Angel Heart, and The Score. From a spontaneous chaos to cold arrogance, from silent grudges to explosive threats that lasted decades. This is the untold truth Hollywood tried to bury. Now let's begin the countdown. No one ever imagined that Robert De Niro, the quiet, meticulous titan of disciplined method acting, would clash with Jennifer Lawrence, Hollywood's queen of spontaneity, instinct, and pure emotional improvisation. But the moment they stepped onto the set of Silver Linings Playbook, it became painfully clear. These two were built from different cinematic universes. De Niro arrived with every breath measured, every emotional transition sculpted, every beat of his character carved in stone. Lawrence walked in with the opposite philosophy: trust the chaos, follow the gut, surrender to the moment. The contrast wasn't just noticeable, it was combustible. And when they reunited for joy, the tension only sharpened. The breaking point came during a crucial basement argument scene. De Niro entered the set fully prepared, carrying the emotional arc he had spent hours building, but Lawrence suddenly shifted the energy, improvising, redirecting the emotional flow, and pulling the scene off its rails. Crew members later said De Niro's expression spoke louder than any words. He wasn't angry. He wasn't frustrated. He was stunned, as if the scene he had meticulously constructed simply evaporated in front of him. He never confronted her. That wasn't his style. Instead, an icy distance settled between them, subtle, quiet, unmistakable. Even in interviews, the tension lingered beneath the surface. When Howard Stern asked De Niro about her unstructured approach, his reply was gentle, but sharp enough to cut. Sometimes spontaneity works, De Niro said slowly. Other times, it's just not being prepared. Hollywood insiders whispered of an unspoken feud. No arguments, no dramatic blow-ups. But 2 actors with no desire to collaborate again anytime soon. And yet, in the strangest twist imaginable, something deeper formed beneath the silence. When Jennifer Lawrence invited De Niro to her rehearsal dinner, she panicked that he looked out of place and whispered, "Go home." Most actors would have been offended, not De Niro. He quietly thanked her, smiled, and left. No bitterness, no tension. Just an odd, almost tender understanding between 2 opposites. Out of friction, they had forged one of Hollywood's most unlikely, quietly affectionate relationships. If Jennifer Lawrence clashed with Robert De Niro through spontaneity, Joaquin Phoenix collided with him like a force of nature. Their partnership in Joker wasn't a collaboration. It was an impact, a violent meeting of 2 acting philosophies at absolute extremes. De Niro built his entire career on quiet discipline, emotional control, and precise preparation. Phoenix, meanwhile, was the very definition of unpredictable, volatile, instinctive, almost feral in his creative process. Putting them in the same film was like trapping fire and ice inside a pressure cooker. The conflict exploded before the cameras even rolled. De Niro insisted on a full table read. Phoenix flatly refused. When director Todd Phillips relayed the refusal, De Niro shot back immediately. Tell him he's an actor, he needs to be there. Cornered, Phoenix reluctantly attended the read-through, but barely participated. He mumbled lines, avoided eye contact, and sat across the table as if every word was an intrusion. The silence between them was thick enough to cut. De Niro, who believed table reads built trust, felt the distance instantly. Phoenix, who believed rehearsals corrupted truth, felt trapped. The tension grew so unbearable that De Niro demanded a private meeting. Phoenix resisted, then reluctantly agreed. What happened next has become a Hollywood legend. The meeting ended with De Niro walking over and kissing Phoenix gently on the cheek, a symbolic truce, fragile, unspoken, brief. On set, they barely exchanged words. Phoenix later explained, "We said good morning and that was it." De Niro agreed. For him, the only relationship that mattered was between their characters, Arthur Fleck and Murray Franklin. Maybe that's why the dynamic worked so brilliantly on a screen. The idol worship, the discomfort, the emotional imbalance. It was real. It came from them, not a script. And when Joker shattered the global box office, earning over $1 billion and giving Phoenix his long-awaited Oscar, their uneasy chemistry became part of the film's mythology. There were no screaming fights, no public feuds, just two men who finished the film professionally and quietly vowed never to share a set again. Before The Sopranos turned Steve Schirripa into a household name, he was just another hungry young actor stepping onto the set of Casino, a film led by giants like Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci. For Schirripa, this was not just a job. It was a dream, a moment he would remember for the rest of his life. And he did remember it, but not for the reasons he hoped. Schirripa played a small role, a bar patron, barely visible in the grand tapestry of the film. But for him, the role wasn't small. This was his chance to meet the man whose performances in Taxi Driver and Raging Bull had shaped his entire vision of acting. He saw De Niro on set, gathered his courage, walked up, and offered a simple, respectful greeting. "Hi, Bob." He expected a nod, a smile, some acknowledgement from the legend he admired. Instead, nothing. No reply, no glance, no recognition at all. As Schirripa later recalled, De Niro didn't even bother to stick around for a hello. The young actor felt a rejection like a slap. It wasn't shyness. It wasn't misunderstanding. To him, it was pure coldness. The moment wounded him deeply, so deeply that decades later, Schirripa still couldn't let it go. On podcasts, he spoke with a bitterness that time never softened. He couldn't be ruder, he said. The guy is a zero. If he doesn't have a script in his hand, he can't speak. To Schirripa, this silence wasn't just disrespect, it was arrogance, a sign that De Niro didn't see him, even as a human being. De Niro, on the other hand, never addressed the moment. No justification, no apology. Maybe he didn't remember. Maybe he was in character. Or maybe small talk simply wasn't his world. But for the Steve Schirripa, that cold brush-off became a defining scar, proof that admiration can turn into lifelong resentment with just a single silent moment. On a screen, Robert De Niro and Billy Crystal looked like a perfect comedy duo, an unlikely pairing whose chemistry helped turn Analyze this into a cultural phenomenon. Audiences loved the contrast. The stone-faced mobster and the frantic, neurotic therapist. But behind the laughter, behind the brilliance, something very different was happening. A quiet, creative war. Their clash began on day one. De Niro arrived on set fully internalized as Paul Vieti, carrying emotional weight, psychological depth, and a precise, rehearsed map of his character's inner life. Crystal, meanwhile, came armed with improvisation, rewriting lines, riffing through scenes, chasing fresh comedic sparks in every take. To De Niro, this felt like chaos. To Crystal, it felt like freedom. And from the first week, the tension was undeniable. Director Harold Ramis later explained the core issue. Billy wanted to discover the moment. Bob wanted precision. That difference didn't just shape their performances, it froze the air between them. Therapy scenes, the heart of the film, became ground zero for their friction. Crystal pushed timing, rewrote jokes mid-scene, and broke rhythm to chase laughs. De Niro refused to follow him off script, grounding himself in the stillness, discipline, and unbreakable seriousness. Crew members noticed frustration simmering beneath De Niro's calm exterior. He shut down, one recalled. He felt Billy was playing for laughs instead of truth. Off camera, the divide only widened. Separate lunches, separate trailers, separate worlds. De Niro reportedly confided to Martin Scorsese that Crystal was playing for laughs, not honesty. A devastating critique, especially coming from an actor who built his reputation on emotional authenticity. Crystal, on the other hand, left the project feeling boxed in, telling friends that he struggled to find rhythm because De Niro gave him nothing to bounce off. No shouting match, no explosion, just two performers drifting apart inch by inch over every creative disagreement. 2 decades later, the silence between them remains. No reunions, no follow-up collaborations, no warm reflections, just an iconic comedy forged by two actors working inches apart, yet emotionally miles away. No one expected tension between Robert De Niro and Ben Stiller. Their pairing in Meet the Parents became one of the most beloved comedic duos of the early 2000s. Audiences laughed because the contrast between them felt so natural, but behind that effortless chemistry was a quiet, persistent storm. From day one, Stiller and De Niro approached comedy from opposite ends of the artistic universe. De Niro treated Jack Burns with absolute seriousness, building a psychological backstory, crafting emotional logic, and grounding every moment in realism. To him, authenticity created comedy, not punchlines. Stiller, on the other hand, thrived on looseness, improvising lines, shifting timing, and twisting scenes in real time to reach maximum comedic effect. At first, the contrast fueled the dynamic, but soon the tension began to show. During the famous polygraph scene, Stiller kept experimenting with delivery, adjusting jokes, and testing different reactions. What audiences saw as brilliant comedy felt, to De Niro, like the scene losing its truth. According to one crew member, De Niro wasn't angry, he was disappointed. He thought the comedy should come from truth, not gags. Between takes, De Niro quietly slipped into his trailer, detaching, recalibrating, withdrawing. The emotional distance became noticeable. Stiller admired De Niro deeply, but the coldness threw off his rhythm. The more as Stiller improvised, the more De Niro retreated. By the time the sequels arrived, they worked side by side, but not together. Their dynamic became strictly professional, respectful, but distant, functional, but not warm. Years later, De Niro summed it up in one line at the Tribeca Film Festival. We just approached the work very differently. A soft sentence, but a clear border. A border that neither crossed again. Some Hollywood feuds fade, some heal, some are forgotten the moment the cameras stop rolling. But the war between Robert De Niro and Mickey Rourke is different. It is one of the longest, coldest, and most deeply personal rivalries modern cinema has ever seen, stretching across nearly 4 decades, filled with bitterness, silence, and one explosive public threat that stunned the entire industry. And it all began on the set of Angel Heart in 1987. De Niro, already a cinematic titan, arrived fully transformed, precise, disciplined, locked inside his character like a fortress. Rourke, raw and unpredictable, expected camaraderie and artistic exchange. He wanted connection. He wanted brotherhood. What he got was ice. Before filming even began, De Niro approached him calmly and said, "It's better if we don't talk." To Rourke, it wasn't a boundary, it was a rejection, a wound. "I looked up to him," Rourke said years later. "Now I look through him." The atmosphere on set darkened immediately. Crew members described the energy as matter and antimatter, circling each other without touching, burning with unspoken hostility. De Niro refused to speak to Rourke directly. Every message went through director Alan Parker. Every glance carried tension. Every silence felt like a battlefield. But the bitterness didn't die when the film wrapped. It grew. Decades later, Rourke claimed De Niro blocked him from meeting Martin Scorsese for The Irishman, saying De Niro refused to work with him. When De Niro's team publicly denied it, Rourke erupted, unleashing a now infamous Instagram message. "When I see you, I'm going to embarrass you severely, 100%. It wasn't a feud anymore. It was personal war. Rourke accused De Niro of arrogance, insecurity, and hiding behind reputation. De Niro responded with the greatest weapon he has always used: silence. Not one word, not one rebuttal, not one public comment. 4 decades after the first spark, their rivalry still smolders, cold, sharp, and unresolved. When Robert De Niro and Edward Norton were first cast together in The Score, 2001, the industry buzzed with excitement. A legendary master of controlled intensity paired with one of Hollywood's sharpest, boldest rising stars. What could possibly go wrong? Everything, as it turned out. The moment the cameras rolled, admiration turned into a quiet, suffocating power struggle. De Niro entered the production with his signature approach: calm precision, emotional clarity, and unwavering discipline. Norton arrived with something entirely different: script notes, rewrites, and a confidence that bordered on confrontation. One crew member described it perfectly. Bob wanted the work to flow like jazz. Norton tried to conduct every beat. The tension deepened when Norton remained half in character, playing a mentally disabled janitor between takes to maintain immersion. To De Niro, this wasn't commitment. It was disrespect, a theatrical imitation instead of grounded truth. At one point, he muttered, just loud enough to be heard, "I learned from real people, not by acting like them." A quiet sentence, a lethal one. From that moment, the set turned cold. De Niro avoided unnecessary conversation. Norton pushed his ideas through the director instead of speaking to De Niro directly. Even Marlon Brando, another legend in the film, tried to ease the tension, then backed away, realizing the divide was too deep to mend. They weren't arguing, a lighting technician recalled, but the cold between them was unreal. Their scenes together sizzled with intensity, but off-screen nothing warmed. No friendly banter, no mutual praise, just professionalism stretched thin over unresolved resentment. Years later, interviews only reinforced the divide. De Niro offered a subtle critique. Preparation matters. Knowing when to stop, that's wisdom. Norton responded with equal sharpness. You learn from everyone, even from people who don't like being challenged. They have never reunited, never collaborated again, never softened toward each other. At a 2019 festival, a journalist asked De Niro if he followed Norton's work. He paused, then said quietly, "He's doing his thing. I'm doing mine." Two men, two methods, two legacies running parallel, never touching again.